Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here, and welcome to some Interstellar Marines. This is a sneak peek of Update 22. It's currently in the Spearhead testing phase, meaning all Spearhead members are able to opt into the Spearhead testing branch of the game and be able to experiment with some of the limited additions to Update 22 currently within the Spearhead test. So one of the biggest changes that could have occurred for this game, and probably one of the best changes that have ever happened to Interstellar Marines, is currently added to this update. And what is it? It is revised weapon recoils and characteristics, as well as also different damage parameters for individual bullets, which is good. Every single round you fire outputs significantly more damage, which obviously is going to change the pace of gameplay in a pretty significant way. Coupled with the ability to have insanely high recoil, it is just going to completely alter the way the game plays and feels. Because we all know from old videos, if you guys have actually watched my old videos on my channel of Interstellar Marines, you've probably seen gameplay where it looks kind of fast-paced, and it kind of looks more like an arcade shooter, and back in the day I compared it to a game called Delta Force Black Hawk Down, which was released in 2003, which was an authentic game, but it was obviously fast-paced and more arcade than your average shooter. You were able to run at a fairly decent speed, which would kind of look like this, and you were able to aim down sights, but there would be zero weapon bob, and you'd be able to shoot things and really accurately, and the recoil was not really existent, and it was really easy to play the game, and it was a fast-paced shooter. Interstellar Marines felt a lot like that. As much as I loved Delta Force Black Hawk Down, it was literally my childhood. Back in the day, during 2003 and 2004, I played the crap out of it. I was a huge fan of all those games. Anyway, that's besides the point. It was a lot more fast-paced. Being able to engage targets while full auto spraying, while moving around like this, was really, really easy to maintain. There wasn't too much recoil. You were able to pick off targets really, really far away on the move, get instant headshots. It was really, really easy. And obviously it wasn't exactly 100% realistic, especially considering that firing from the shoulder or point shooting had a different recoil pattern. Like, the weapon fired and felt completely different compared to actually aiming down your sights. Aiming down your sights was really manageable and you were able to pick off targets really far away, but if you were to try to do the same thing shoulder firing, the recoil was completely different and was actually more significant, which didn't quite line up and correlate with using your weapon sight. So I'm going to go ahead and show you and demonstrate the new recoil system, because this is just really nice. I'm so happy they revised this because it's a lot more realistic. So I'll go ahead and show you an example. This is going to be me firing the weapon fully automatic without trying to compensate for muzzle drift and muzzle climb. So I'm just going to go ahead and let it go. As you can see, now I'm aiming at the ceiling. That is a pretty drastic muzzle climb, as you could, like, it's just nuts. It goes way up, the recoil, like, the actual kick of the weapon and the vibration of the sight doesn't look as significant when it's climbing. It will when you actually try to compensate for that muzzle climb. So I'm going to actually try to control the fire, and you're going to see just how much the sight actually kicks. It's way more sporadic now than it was in the past. In the past, you were pretty much able to hit the same spot repeatedly if you can control the muzzle climb. Now, it's a lot more difficult to maintain that recoil, which is a good thing, because obviously firing at range, and that's just standing still. Like, you know, I'm standing still, I'm just trying to, like, shoot it fully automatic. It's not really practical to engage a threat from long range like that now, which is exactly like it is in real life. If I were moving doing the same thing, it's like even more so impractical, which is a nice thing. And the best part of this is it actually makes firing in semi-automatic a viable function. Semi-automatic before it had no point. You know, like, why was semi-automatic in the game when fully automatic is still viable? It's kind of like the situation with Rainbow Six Siege right now, right? Remember me talking about that in my Rainbow Six video if you watched it? Firing in fully automatic is just beneficial because there is no penalty. In fact, the weapon recoil system you're seeing here needs to be implemented into Rainbow Six Siege, because that would just make the game significantly better, because semi-automatic would actually be something you would really use. But this is a prime example. If anyone wanted to ask me the question of, what someone did and I answered them, why semi-automatic would be better than fully automatic, and this actually is a good illustration just from this game right here. You can see that you can fire rapidly in semi-automatic, and it's a little bit more controllable, even while on the move, compared to firing in fully automatic. If you're firing fully automatic, even trying to control the bursts, you can see muscle memory, all those problems of trying to stabilize that muzzle and keep it on sight, or on target, is a lot more difficult. Even the most highly trained soldiers have difficulty managing full automatic spray. Like, it's because it's not entirely predictable. It's predictable to know the way the weapon behaves, with like muzzle climb and how it actually operates when you're firing fully automatic, but it's kind of less predictable whenever you have a higher rate of fire because it's essentially vibrating in your hands and you can't really control that vibration. And that vibration is obviously increased the higher the rate of fire is, because there's not that much time in between each round being ejected and fired out the barrel to actually compensate for the next shot that's going to be coming out. If the rate of fire was actually significantly slower, then naturally you'd be able to control individual shots, which is exactly like semi-automatic. You're able to reset your sight on target before you fire the next round. If you were firing a fully automatic weapon that fired as slow as this, naturally you'd be able to compensate because there's more time in between shots to reset your aim. But again, the higher the rate of fire, the more difficult it is. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the submachine gun now. It's obviously got the same alterations. Damage has been buffed. Rate of fire has been buffed. I believe it's now 720 rounds per minute versus a 685 or 90 or something like that. If I forget, if this is wrong, I'll put a correction annotation in the actual video on YouTube. But it's got a nice buff in rate of fire, so it's a lot more viable in actual close quarters, as well as obviously a recoil buff and a damage buff. So we'll go ahead and show you the same thing as the assault rifle, unsupported, try not to compensate. As you can see, drastic muzzle climb just like the assault rifle. It's pretty much almost identical, the angle of trajectory of like the climb. And if I try to control it, like, you have to actually pull down pretty significantly on the mouse to maintain that recoil. Which is a good thing. Meaning you're not going to be able, unless you actually have a giant mouse pad where you have all the room in the world to, you know, hold it down while trying to follow a target, then it may be a little bit more viable. For most people, it's not really practical to, I mean, firing bursts like this, like on the move, like moving and then stopping and firing a burst. Like if I do that, like if I'm walking and I stop, fire a burst, keep moving, fire a burst. You can see this is more practical, which is actually how firing and moving works. A lot of the time when you talk about fire and movement, it's not really moving and shooting at the same time. It's more along the lines of running to a position, getting down, firing, getting up, running to another position, getting down, firing. That's really what shooting or fire and movement really means. Obviously, it can also translate to moving, walking, and shooting. But for the most part, it's referring to getting into firing positions and moving to the next firing position and moving to the next firing position and so on, engaging targets along the way. So this is going to drastically alter gameplay for the better, because some people were discussing how would you make this game feel more realistic? How would you slow down the pace and make it feel better? Because we all know the movement allows for some pretty aggressive and fast plays. But the thing is, slowing down gameplay even further by intentionally making the movement slower. I mean, this is already slow enough. Like, you go and play other tactical shooters, and you come and play this, the walking speed is really slow. This is reminiscent of Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter on PC, which only has 2 movement speeds, which is this, and sprint. This game has 3. It has the slow walk, it has the tactical pace, tactical speed. It's kind of like a shuffle run where you're able to... This would be ideal for initial entries in rooms with flashbangs. You're using flashbangs to get into the room, etc. To get in there and clear it quickly. To get through that doorway, which is basically a death funnel. You want to get through that as quickly as possible. And this pace is usually what you would use, so it's nice. Or just a simple leisurely jog to get to terrain quicker while also having your weapon readily available to fire if you need to. Obviously, it's not really practical for engaging targets, which is the point, because in real life at this pace, it's a little bit more difficult to engage at long range. Close quarters, not so much. You can point shoot pretty accurately, like this game allows you to do. But naturally, at long range, it's not necessarily as viable, which is exactly what I love about this particular update, because in real life, that's the case. This game is actually mimicking what it feels like in real life to operate a weapon, and not handicapping the player by diminishing his ability to move and feel like he's actually a human being, because humans are capable of a lot, believe it or not. You're able to run and move at a pretty significant pace, even wearing a shit ton of gear. People tend to think that you wear a bunch of gear, suddenly you're bogged down like some kind of knight from the medieval ages and you're unable to function properly at all. That is a lie. I mean, depending on how much gear you have, yeah, it's going to weigh you down. It's going to make things a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't completely limit your ability to function. Unless you're wearing like shoulder pads, thigh pads, literally a giant suit of armor, it's not really going to affect how much you can move. And I guess you could say that in Interstellar Marines, you are wearing a giant suit of armor. But I imagine in the future, this would be kind of like armor that's a little bit more agile or dexterous, or however the hell you would say that. It allows for more agility than you would obviously expect from traditional armor you see nowadays, which people wear, which even then you're still able to function and move pretty effectively. But then again, slow movement is king. And that's what I like about this now, because obviously moving slower is going to make those shots easier to maintain, which is exactly what you want when you're engaging threats. So this enforces the player to actually naturally slow down and stop before he engages a threat, versus sprinting all over the place and being able to shoot and move with tremendous effective accuracy. And this is a right step in the right direction. Like, this is gold. It's literally the best thing that could have happened in this game. Next, I want to talk about actual damage. So let's go ahead and discuss how much damage these weapons do now. The assault rifle dishes out a significant amount of damage. We're double tapping, which is a real type of firing technique. Like, if I'm walking in the wilderness and suddenly I get contacted, I turn and I double tap at the enemy, and then also there's some other follow through techniques that you would obviously use. For the most part, double tapping is really good, because if you can land those 2 shots, center mass is just 2 rounds on target. Center mass. From any range, even friendlies. Friendlies are not excluded. Before it was like, oh yeah, friendlies can absorb a little bit more damage from you. Not anymore. Now it's like 2 rounds center mass and you are dead. I believe it's like, if you hit the arms and the legs, it takes more damage. So if I shoot this guy in the leg, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to the leg. And 2 center mass. Obviously 1 to the head, that's what you would expect, because the head is extremely vulnerable in most shooters. Unless you have like some crazy helmet armor. And if you put on a suppressor, that damage is lowered to being 3 shots. So it takes 1 extra round center mass to drop a target. And it's still 1 shot to the head. Now the assault rifle doesn't suffer from damage drop off. Before, it used to be like if you were using a submachine gun or even the assault rifle, if you put a suppressor on, it would require, or it would diminish damage over time. So like the further away you were, the less damage you would do. If you were closer to a target, I believe it was within like 25 meters, it wouldn't really make a difference. You'd be able to kill them just as effectively. But now it doesn't make a difference. Like if I get right up and close to these guys, it's still going to be 2 rounds to the chest. 2 rounds center mass. If it's a regular round. I'm using a suppressor right now, so it's still 3. If I take it off, it'll be 2. So the range does not matter for the assault rifle. However, it does for the submachine gun. So if I equip the submachine gun, put it on semi-automatic, close range, it's 3 rounds. The equivalent of the assault rifle with the suppressor. Which just makes burst fire actually viable, because now if you fire bursts and you land all 3 shots, that quick burst is enough to drop a target. Which is really awesome. I mean, I'm happy to see that added, because now burst fire obviously has a place. Even though burst fire is kind of like a terrible fire selective type of... Anyway, nobody really uses burst fire in real life because it's kind of the same principle behind automatic, but in a burst. So it's a little bit less predictable than actually firing in fully automatic. Anyway, so at range, this changes. As you can see, it's 4 rounds center mass. Or 3 rounds center mass. Correction. It takes 3 rounds. I hit that guy in the arm, that's why. Center mass, 3 rounds. Depending on where you hit him. I keep hitting him in the arms, because it's a little bit harder to aim, obviously, without a magnified optic. But with the suppressor, this is where it actually, there is a damage drop off. You can see now it takes 4 rounds. So from further away, it takes 4 rounds suppressed with a submachine gun. Up close, it takes 3. And without it, obviously. So, anyway, the point is the damage drop-off is there with the submachine gun, not so much the assault rifle. The assault rifle isn't really affected, which is what you would expect, and is a good thing. And I'm really happy about that. So, I am really happy with this change. Like, this is a huge step in the right direction. I noticed they also initially added another extra round to the magazine for the assault rifle. I thought that was because they were trying to implement, like, the extra round in the chamber when you do, like, a tactical reload. When you retain the magazine and there's still a round in the chamber. But I realized that's actually because burst fire. When you were firing in burst before, 20 rounds would leave 2 rounds left. So it would end up looking... Whoops, I kind of messed that up. If you fired... Anyway, you had 20 rounds in your magazine. If you fired in bursts, by the time you got to, like, the end of your magazine, it would only be the 2 rounds left like that. And you would just fire 2 rounds. They added the extra round so that it's an even burst. So if you are using burst fire, now you actually fire 3 rounds consistently through the entire magazine. So that's why they added that. Originally, I thought it was because of, you know, trying to implement that whole round in the chamber when you reload thing, but then I realized that the submachine gun still had 30 rounds, so I was kind of like, that doesn't really make any sense. Especially how he's doing it, he's conducting like an entirely fresh reload. Like he cocks the weapon, ejects the round, pulls the magazine out, and then chambers a new round. So it didn't really make any sense, but I mean, for the most part, this is excellent. Absolutely excellent. This is one of the most accurate weapon depictions I've experienced in a game, while maintaining the fluidity and the natural feel of using keyboard and mouse. Like, I can honestly say this game is one of the best feeling shooters I have ever played. Like, most people that play it, it kind of feels new to them and, like, sluggish, and, like, a lot of people don't really, like, it, they're not used to it. For me, it's like, when I get into this, it's like, this feels natural, you know, like, turning on a target, like, and point shooting feels so natural to me. It's, like, the best I've ever encountered in a game, because point shooting feels natural. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm walking around, oh, there's a threat, point and shoot. You know, it's just that easy to do. And you can do it at decent ranges as well. And just the fluid movement of just moving the weapon around, the camera, like the mouse sensitivity, the movement of the, like, the actual character himself, everything is just great. Like, it's literally one of the best I've experienced, because it just feels totally natural, as I've already said. Like, I feel like I'm actually moving my real body. Like, it feels like I am really here controlling someone like myself, where I have the agility and the flexibility to move around while also being really efficient firing the weapon like I would be in real life. So, it's excellent. I'm so thrilled for this change. I really am, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to alter gameplay. But I want to talk about one of the things that always bugged me about Interstellar Marines, which is a little feature. It's not that big of a deal, and it can easily be removed with the ability to lean, but I'll discuss it anyway, and that's this horizontal weapon sway you're seeing by strafing back and forth. Yeah, like you'll see the weapon kick out left and right, the muzzle. I find that annoying because, again, it's not 100% realistic. It's kind of like a game mechanic that's put in place to artificially balance the fact that they don't want you to be all Counter-Strike, peeking corners, all like fast, rapid strafing while shooting all weird. They do this to kind of limit the ability to obviously effectively... I mean, obviously, if you kind of time it right, you can kind of predict where it'll land and where the crosshair will stop, but it's not really practical. It's obviously a lot harder to snap out of cover, because you pop out, you have to wait for the sights to reset. Like, you have to wait for the sight to center, and then you can engage, and then come back. Like, it's not practical, right? Like, you don't want to be doing that, so it's kind of... the incentive for this is just to prevent you from being able to strafe rapidly. Obviously, if you want to strafe from one direction, it's consistent, because it stays there, right, and it bobs. But it's still something I'm not particularly fond of, just because that's not how things function in real life. Like, your left arm that's supporting the muzzle, that's holding the handguard, isn't doing anything, because it's just letting the weapon fly back and forth like this, right? It's just like, why is this happening? In real life, your upper body is essentially a rock. You are super firm, stabilizing this weapon. Your whole upper body's purpose is to be a stable platform for your weapon to rest on and fire. And your hips and your legs and your waist essentially act as the buffer and the shocks between your upper body. Think of it like an M1 tank. You're essentially a human gyro stabilizer. The turret on an M1 tank can stay perfectly fixated on a target rolling through the desert, over rough desert, at 50 kilometers an hour, but the gun could stay perfectly straight, aiming at a target up to 2 kilometers away, and engage it while moving 50 kilometers an hour over rough desert terrain. Because the turret is gyro stabilized, while the rest of the body moves independently. Or if you ever watched that episode of Futurama where Bender's on a ship, and he's gyro stabilizing some kind of glass or something really fragile, and the ship's all going crazy, but he's perfectly gyro stabilized, maintaining the perfect balance of that instrument, or that fragile item. It's the same principle. You're trying to maintain that firing platform as your body and your legs kind of alter and move around to compensate for it. So the sway, I mean, the sway kind of looks like the velocity in which I am traversing, like strafing back and forth. The acceleration so extreme that I'm not able to keep my sight picture straight, which doesn't really make too much sense. One way to kind of help diminish this would just be to make it so that, you know, when you're walking slower and you're strafing back and forth, then get rid of it. Like, if you're walking slower, it's far, like, less pronounced. That would be nice. Because right now, as it stands, walking slowly or walking quickly, it's not that different. The sight, I mean, look, I'm switching back and forth between the two. You can barely see a difference in the drastic sway between the two. They're almost identical. So it'd be nice to see something like, you know, if I'm moving. I mean, like, look, it's just like, it doesn't really work. It kind of bugs me because it's a little bit over-exaggerated. It's not a problem, though. Like, obviously, as I was saying, if you had the ability to lean, then that wouldn't be a problem. You'd just be here, it'd be perfectly straight, and then you would lean out, and it wouldn't be an issue. Which leaning is something I really want to see in the game, and soon, because that would be the final straw to really nail the tactical shooter core mechanics home. For the core elements, like of actually shooting and moving, the way your character feels, that would be the final thing to add, in my mind, to really set the framework for what a tactical shooter feels like. That's not counting gadgets, obviously. If you think of tactical shooters, you think of flashbangs and frag grenades and smoke grenades and all that crazy stuff. But for the most part, this would be the last thing that would be needed to really make it feel like a tactical shooter, the ability to lean. And I really hope that's added soon because, like, come on. Every shooter usually has that implemented from the very beginning. This is something I would love to see added soon just to, like, make the gameplay that much more significant and more tactical along the lines of all other shooters in the same genre. Like, it just feels so much better. So, I mean, those are the little things. This is a sneak peek at the current update. Obviously, there's a few differences as well. Like, there's a lot of other things in the changelog. But these are the major things I want. Like, this is the major one in the changelog I wanted to cover. Because it makes the game that much better. Going into actual online multiplayer like this is going to feel significantly better. The lethality of actually engaging threats, coupled with the ability to have really high recoil, is going to basically allow for proper engagements, right? It's going to feel more realistic. When you want to engage someone, you're going to want to stop and get that sight picture set up. You're not going to be wanting to move around, shooting, because it's going to be like, as you can see, no matter how hard I try to maintain that sight picture on target, it bounces too much, and that's exactly what you would expect. And I love it. I really, really, really do. My hat's off to 0 Point Software, and I believe the initial... I think this is actually all due to a community manager. His name it goes by the name of Spectre. He was a former Marine. So it's kind of nice to have someone else who could be a military advisor who's got a lot of experience with firing and handling firearms and weapons in the military in a combat setting to be able to weigh in. I think it was him that actually altered the variables on the weapons. I'm not entirely certain of that, but I believe that's what was happening. I believe it was him that was getting the weapon set up right. So everybody thanks Spectre for basically making this game amazing. Just because that small little thing that's going to change the way the game feels altogether. It's going to throw a lot of people off. I have a feeling. I bet a lot of people want to play this game and be like, what? This is insane. The recoil's too much. But it's like, no, this is literally how it feels to fire and operate a weapon. it couldn't get any more accurate and realistic. Like, I mean, every game should look at Interstellar Marines for its, like, firing and movement capability and how it feels, because this game sets the bar for that, I think. It's one of the best. And obviously coming back from Rainbow Six Siege, which I made a couple of videos on, like, my god, if Rainbow Six Siege copied this exact shooting mechanic, even with its movement and everything currently in place, it would be that much better. It would honestly change the gameplay like extremely, and firing in semi-automatic would actually be useful. But I digress. My name is PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today on this video, and I will see you guys on the next one. Can't even see that guy. Oh, there it is. Anyway. Take care.